Hello and welcome to my channel. Here I review new movies and television shows and release a new review every day from Monday to Friday. Today's movie is Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. It's a superhero action film that follows Ant-Man and his family of superheroes after they are sucked into the quantum realm. It was written by Jeff Loveness, is based on characters and stories created by Jack Kirby, and is directed by Peyton Reed. Just a heads up, this review will contain minor spoilers related to character background and plot structure, so beware. Quantumania is the third installment in director Peyton Reed's trilogy and introduces a new villain, a new location, and gives us another chapter in Scott Lang's life. All the main characters return for this film, and we also get a few side character cameos from the rest of the MCU. But Luis and his friends are gone. They had too many funny people already and didn't have time for another long-winded story. I missed Michael Pena, but they distributed his funny lines to the rest of the cast and it works out alright. The film still has a comedic tone to it. The story starts off with Scott living the life, enjoying his time as a former superhero and full-time dad, and still being mistaken for other superheroes. He then meets up with his family and finds out that Cassie, Hank, and Hope are all working on exploring the quantum realm. When they go to show him and Janet the experiment, a portal opens up and pulls them all into the quantum realm. Cassie and Scott are separated from Hank, Hope, and Janet. Janet freaks out and reveals that there's someone in the quantum realm they should be scared of, Kang the Conqueror. The film revolves around the conflict between the Pym Lang family and Kang, and delves into the backstories of Kang and Janet Van Dyne while also centering on Scott and his relationship with Cassie. The biggest draw of the film is Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror. He shows up and immediately he has a huge presence. He's got these creepy scars running down both sides of his face, and he speaks with an immense amount of gravitas. His relationships with the other characters are fascinating, and as a villain he actually does the dirty work himself, which was a nice change. His relationship with Janet is an interesting one. He genuinely seems to care for Janet at first, and even seems like he wants to make good on his promise to her. When she turned on him, it didn't change his mind about her, it just changed how much of himself he showed her. He's a monstrous person, and yet he still has some honor in him. When he interacts with Scott, he belittles him and the other Avengers. The way he speaks gives the impression that he's killed the Avengers so many times that he doesn't even remember Scott. And yet, when Scott finally pushes him, he reveals that he knows every little detail about him and doesn't consider him a threat in any way. When they finally fought, he beat Ant-Man senselessly, and for the first time in a Marvel film, it felt like we were going to see a hero brutally beaten to death. It was incredible tension, and the writers and Jonathan Majors should be commended for creating such a good villain. Majors plays the emotions with an intensity that fits Kang's arrogance and moves like a man who thinks the world should be bowing at his feet. He nailed the character, and I can't wait to see what he does with the role in the future. The rest of the story and the characters end up feeling secondary to everything Kang does and almost like passengers in their own film. Ant-Man never makes any decisions and never takes charge of the situation. He's reacting to everything that's happening and trying to survive while protecting his family, to the point that Cassie seems more like a superhero than Scott does. Scott ends up getting a few moments where he uses his suit to fight off Kang's henchmen, and 2 different fights with Kang, but outside of changing size and making little jokes, he doesn't really do much. The rest of his screen time is him cautioning Cassie repeatedly. Cassie ends up doing more than Scott as the young hero looking to make a name for herself. She's always trying to right different wrongs and even gets a suit of her own. The character is a bit of a Mary Sue and is just good at everything, but she gets a few decent one-liners and she gets some nice emotional beats with her dad. Both Paul Rudd and Katherine Newton, who plays Cassie, come off as normal folk who just got stuck in a superhero costume. Both have great comedic timing, and Newton does a good job of emulating Rudd's jovial nature. She seems just as carefree and is even quicker to make a joke. Seriously though, Marvel, stop making kids into super geniuses who figure everything out in their garage during the blip. You've used this backstory for Ironheart, Kate Bishop, and now Cassie. It's really bad storytelling and it makes everyone hate the characters. They just had everything handed to them off screen without earning it. At least if you're going to do that, it should come with a serious flaw that makes their lives difficult. Next we have Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym. Hank Pym gets 3 minutes total, and every second of it is comedic relief. Michael Douglas does okay with the jokes, but the character could have been absent from the film and nothing would have changed. Janet Van Dyne is the second most interesting character outside of Kang, and learning about her backstory was actually pretty fun. Bill Murray shows up to tell us about her freedom fighter past, and we get a scene of the 2 of them exchanging barbs. Janet shows off how serious and strong she is, and Murray hints at a darker personality hiding underneath. Michelle Pfeiffer plays her as stoic and guarded. She doesn't talk much, but when she does talk, she doesn't say more than she needs to. She comes off as fearless and quick to action. The story is generally well written, and the characters are likable, albeit a little similar in nature, but it lacks consequences. Kang doesn't kill anyone important until nearly the end of the film, and they never get across the real scope of the war between Kang and the freedom fighters. This is a brutal war between them, but before the final battle, Kang only attacks once and only kills random civilians. Production-wise, the film was all over the place. The visuals are mostly a CGI fest with a lot of extravagant-looking cities and locations. They don't spend much time on it, mostly showing us overhead shots of the locations and having the actors move indoors so they can film on a real set. The real sets they made gave me huge Star Wars vibes. Like there's a room they bring Janet to at one point that looks just like the bridge from an Imperial destroyer. The action sequences tended to be choppy, sped up, and hard to follow, especially when Ant-Man, Wasp, or Cassie turned small and started fighting people. When they were big, it just turned into another King Kong movie. They ignore blasters and smash their way through everything. The film also had a visually pleasing final fight that's ruined immediately if you think about it at all. The fight between Kang and Ant-Man has this incredible gravity to it where Ant-Man is getting beaten down and you're terrified for him as you see Kang overwhelming him. Then afterward, all you can think is, why did Scott fight Kang at normal size instead of using his powers? He doesn't shrink or grow once in the final fight, and it's just dumb. Why wouldn't he? The film doesn't say anything about his suit being broken or him being out of Pym particles. He just fist fights Kang for the glory, I guess. Visually, the film looks good and has lots of cool CGI fight scenes and effects, but the action is just mindless. Sound-wise, the film is similar in scope and sound to franchises like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. The music is perfectly scored to feel dramatic and breathtaking. It's filled with wonder and awe with lots of mystical spacey vibes to it. Orchestral pieces follow every little beat of the story and amplify each feeling and mood. The theme for Kang vs. Lang is quickly becoming one of my favorites. Overall, I found the movie to be an entertaining film that just didn't have the weight or consistency it needed to make the story into something great. The visuals are fun to look at but tend to be a bit mindless. The soundtrack is wonderful and inspiring, perfectly backing each scene. The cast does everything they can to create characters that are fun and likable, but the story is just too fluffy and trope-filled. They had an opportunity for this movie to end with real consequences and they chose to Disneyfy it. If you want a light superhero story, then this one is fun and good for a watch or two. 7 out of 10.